And we are back with the fifth and the final segments of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we are going to be talking about the WNBA and the postseason games that are going to be going on later today. So, just a little bit of a reminder of how the seasons are, like how the series is right now for each of the playoff series and the semifinals. So the Lynx, they're scheduled to play the Connecticut Sun, and right now this series right here, is tied at 1-1. However, Connecticut has 2 home games that they get to play, assuming that they have 2 home games that they have to play, and depending on the results of the home games could actually determine the result of the season. So Connecticut could close out. They could close out the season, and they could close out Minnesota in these 2 home games. Since they managed to steal a game from Minnesota, they stole game 1, and then Minnesota ended up bouncing back and won game 2. But right now, this is actually like a perfect trajectory for the Connecticut Sun to close out this series, because again, the 2 home games, having home field advantage is massive, especially here in Connecticut, because Connecticut is home to a lot of good women's sports teams. I mean, the Sun for one, but also UConn women's basketball is just fantastic, and also gets a lot of recognition from not just the media but a lot of students as well. And of course, the men's basketball team is also rather solid, but still, the Connecticut Sun, if they end up winning the WNBA finals, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people here, especially at the school, are going to rejoice and be like, "Yay, they did it!" And they do have a very, very solid option to be able to do that. It's a very, very close bet. They do have it in the bag. Now, the Liberty, however, and against the Aces. Now, the Liberty, they're up 2-0 against the Aces. However, the Aces also have the 2 home games, so they could play in game 3, and then they could win it and extend the series and possibly even tie the series to force a game 5. However, all the Liberty needs is one good game. All they need is to have one good game collectively, and they can win. Now, the problem, obviously, for the Liberty is going into hostile territory, especially in Vegas. You guys know how I feel about Vegas, and you guys know how I feel about, having a team there. But still, going into an away crowd with the momentum behind you is not necessarily ideal, because I feel like the crowd is going to get a little bit more into it than they normally would to try and help their team win a game in the series. And if they end up sweeping the Aces, this is going to really affect the legacy of Sabrina Ionescu, Brenna Stewart, and also Aja Wilson, who just recently came out complaining, but I'm not going to talk about that. But at the end of the day, the Liberty, they're going to play the Aces at 9:30 p.m., and the Lynx are going to play against the Sun at 7:30 p.m. I'm pretty sure one of my teacher is going to go to the Connecticut Sun game because he's a really big fan of sports and women's sports as well. So definitely, I honestly hope that I see him on TV, so that way I could just go ahead and snap a picture of him and be like, "Oh my God, that's you!" That would be so funny. But again, this series, it's starting to shape up. This is really starting to shape up the more competitive series between these two. I think the Liberty are easily going to close out the Aces. Honestly, I think they're easily going to close them out. In whether they lose the first game, that's honestly fine. They do have another game. However, it's important to note that the Liberty should not go into the game with that mentality. They should go into the game with the mentality that they are going to close out right now, and not the lame mentality of, "Oh, okay, it's okay that we didn't close out. There's still the next game." No, because the minute you let up and the minute you do that, that is when you lose the series, and that is when you blow a 2-0 lead. And that is something that you absolutely cannot afford to do. You cannot do that if you are the Liberty. You got to go into this game thinking you are going to win. You got to go into there knowing that you're going to win, because the Aces right now, They have nothing left to lose. They're going to be playing their hearts out, and they are going to be trying their best to get this win. And now for Connecticut and Minnesota, Connecticut needs to go into this game thinking that they are going to take advantage of both of these home games and that they're going to close out the series as well. And I think Minnesota should go into the game thinking we have to steal this game so that we have a chance of winning the series in the final game. Because if they are able to steal a game, then that would mean that, they'll be up 2-1. They can afford to lose the final game, and not the final game. They could afford to lose game 4 and then play at home. But actually, I scratch that. I don't think they should go into that mentality at all, because I just remembered that the Connecticut Sun ended up beating them at home. So Minnesota, they have to try and steal at least one game, and if they can steal 2, then that's all the power to them. But the reality, both of these teams, they have to go into all of these, both of this team and this team, they have to go all in or go all out. This one as well, you can make the argument that they also have to go all in, because they do have the home court advantage and they have to take advantage of that home court advantage. I said advantage a lot there, I understand. And the Liberty, they just cannot let up and they just cannot choke. That's really their mentality. That's going to be their thought process going into this game. So who do I have winning the games for today? I think the Connecticut Sun are going to win and make the series 2-1, and I think the Liberty are going to sweep. And I hope the Liberty sweep, honestly. I genuinely hope that the Liberty sweep, because after A'ja Wilson's comments, not a big fan of her. She's a fantastic player, just not a big fan anymore. Not as big of a fan as I want to be. I'm still going to give her the respect that she deserves, because let's face it, she is a phenomenal athlete and a great WNBA player, the best WNBA player in the league right now, without a doubt. She has a statue, for crying out loud, and she's still playing, which speaks in of itself. But her comments have sort of, again, not a big fan. And I'm not going to address those comments because they're not important. Just not a fan. My opinion. If you guys have a different opinion, then that's okay. We can have our opinions. But that is all that I have on this podcast for today, and that's all for the show. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates as well. As usual, please remember that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you guys have a hot take, burning question, we're all ears. Please remember to go ahead and use Super Chat. Just click on the $sign below the chat box, send in your comments and or donations that way, and it's guaranteed to get featured on the show. Or you can use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or helps the show, makes it much more interactive. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and watch the NBA preseason game right now, because that's shaping up to be... Let's actually go ahead and look at the score real quick before I cap it off. So right now it is the start of the third quarter, and the Nuggets are up 70-61 against the Boston Celtics. Yes, it is shaping up. I am turning out to be right. So I recommend tuning into that. It's NBA basketball. I don't care if it's the preseason. It's still basketball, and I love it. So that's all that I have today on this podcast. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna